Hey, welcome to another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. A great treat today. My good buddy Rick Lowe is here from Project Row Houses. And Rick is a special guy because he's within the last year, he's won the MacArthur Genius Award. And I guess it's quote unquote the Genius Award, right?
It's a MacArthur Fellowship is what it really is, but you know.
Yeah. But I feel like since you're a genius, you're going to be able to solve all of our problems here, Rick. So, Rick, thanks for coming into the studio and talking with us a little bit. And I understand you just flew back from London, so I'm going to hold you to everything you say, by the way. So with all this, so
alrighty.
If you were writing a book on leadership, say it's creativity and leadership, Rick, what would some of the chapters be about? What are some of your feelings about leadership?
I think it all kind of starts with a passion.
Yeah.
I think that's at the core of every good leader is that, they have to be passionate about something, know. And I guess, maybe the second thing would be, a strong commitment. I mean, really kind of understanding that, being passionate about something. There are a lot of people that are passionate about things, but they find a hard time really committing to something. And so to me, it's a combination of those things that become really important.
There are a lot of people that have passion and commitment, but aren't successful. And where was the difference for you that you brought all this passion and commitment to Project Row Houses, yet you've been able to bring a lot of people that follow you, a lot of people that want to support you, a lot of people that want to be part of your team, whether it's a core team or an external team? How do you make that happen?
Well, I think a big part of that is, people think of leadership as just being all about me. It's like, this is what I do. I think a great part of leadership, though, is, how you can impart some of that to other people, and being generous in terms of your, not just your time, but your space, and also you're being generous enough to listen to other people. And that's empowering for people. And I think really in order to be a good leader, you have to, you need to position yourself in a place where other people feel empowered as well. Because if you're the only one, and that's one of the things I think that happens a lot, is you have a lot of people who are passionate and they're committed, but they're not generous enough to allow anyone else to be in the process, and so they're the one person band, just keeps kind of pushing along.
Yeah, and this whole idea of listening, we've heard this from so many leaders here at this table, where the idea that listening is a big part of leadership.
Oh, it's a huge part of leadership. It's a huge part of leadership. Because I think one of the things, too, I always tell people, that I work with is that, you also want to let people know that you don't know everything. Because once you get to the point that you know everything, then you've already closed off, a big, broad, group of supporters, right? People that want to be involved, but, they don't feel like they have anything to offer because you already got everything. You've figured it all out, and it's like, that's not really what you want to do if you want to have an impact that goes beyond yourself.
What for you? When did your art and the beginning of Project Row Houses become more than just art and sort of more of a passion?
Yeah. Well, okay. So now, back when I started out as an artist, I mean, it was me in a studio producing my work and trying to inspire people from that perspective. Yeah. And and it went fine. It went well. But then at a certain point, I figured that the things that I was interested in, I was interested in something a little bigger. How do you get to something bigger? And I couldn't see doing it only through my studio. That was a limited way. And so, the idea of trying to figure out, how do I use my creativity to enlist other people into a process in which we're all being creative and we're all, working toward a similar goal. That was the turning point, and that was, it was a humbling experience for me, though, because, when you come out of a studio practice, I mean, generally most people think of artists as being those people that you just, close the door on them and they're just fine, you know, and they get done what they need to do. But for somebody like me that was interested in, you know, broader community impact, I had to, it took a little while for me to figure out how to open myself up.
Wow. And when did the, you know, one of the things that this week we watched this TED Talk on Rick Warren and sort of the purposeful life. And when did you realize that everything that was happening with Project Row Houses wasn't just, you know, a segue from an art project, but sort of became a purpose for your life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think...
Or do you think it is?
No, I think it is. I think it is. But I also think that I've been a little bit fortunate in the sense that, you know, I think I was kind of, from an early stage of my life, you know, I always knew that, you know, I came from a poor, rural Alabama area, and, you know, and I just saw that there were things that poor people went through that was just, you know, that you know, somebody needed to contribute to improving those conditions. And, you know, I just always thought that was my purpose, you know, to do that. And so, you know, originally I thought I would be playing basketball. You know, I was around the year of Michael Jordan time, so he just kind of dimmed that light for me. But I even think about it, you know, in that context, you know, it's like, you know, anybody can contribute, you know, to improving their communities or the world in whatever way that they choose to. You just have to, you know, you have to somehow find that as your purpose. Yeah. And it was my purpose early on.
Tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, did you grow up in Alabama? I mean, where'd you go to college? And
born and raised in Alabama, Russell County, Alabama, which is it's a rural county.
Near? What is that near?
It's close to Tuskegee.
Okay.
Some people know, but it's also it's really close to the Georgia border.
Yeah.
And so that's where I grew up all the way until I was 17 and went away to college.
Where'd you go?
I went to Alabama State University to play basketball.
Yeah.
But like I said,
so you were a basketball player.
Yeah. But the light dimmed really quickly on that. I only stayed there a summer for the summer program. But then I left and I went to a little small college in Georgia, Columbus State University.
And that's where you graduated?
Didn't graduate there. I've hopped around a lot of different places. Texas Southern. I've been I've been in a lot of different places. Yeah.
And how did you end up in Houston doing what you're doing now at Project Row Houses? What's the evolution there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, when I left school in Georgia, I moved to Mississippi. I lived there for a little while, practicing my art. Yeah. Making art that dealt with political and social issues impacting low-income communities. And after being there for about a year and a half, I was ready to tackle the big city. You know, I mean, because I never lived. I'm from, you know, rural farm area, and you know, Columbus, Georgia, was the largest city that I had ever been in, which was, and also living on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi was not a big city. I spent a little time in New Orleans, and that was a little more. But I thought I need to go to a big city, and I originally was thinking about New York, like every artist, but it's too cold up there. So I said, you know, I got to find some other place, and I drove with a friend to Houston, and I got here, and I just realized this is an incredible place. I mean, it was it was an interesting place in the mid-'80s, you know, to arrive here, because there was a lot of raw energy. There was no investment in the downtown area, and it was just it was a great place to become an artist, and so that's how I got here.
That's how it all happened.
That's how I got here.
When you look at art nonprofits in Houston, and really around the country, because you travel a fair bit, when you see art nonprofits that are sort of underperforming, what do you usually attribute that to? Is it about leadership? Is it about passion? What usually is sort of the reasons that, because certainly I'm sure you look at art places sometimes and think this should be a lot bigger than it is.
I you know, it's generally about leadership. I think it's generally about leadership. You know, and sometimes I also think though that, you know, leadership sometimes, being a good leader, can also speak to someone about the scale of the work that they do. So sometimes we might see it from the outside and say, oh my God, this thing is so great, it should be bigger. But maybe the leadership understands something that we don't know from the outside, so they monitor and manage the scale of the growth. But I think but ultimately, the survival of any nonprofit organization, it rests in the leadership of its leaders. And I think so often, one of the most damaging things for leaders, I think, in the arts field, and probably most others, is exposure to new things that are going on. People they fall asleep. They fall asleep at the wheel. They're doing what they're doing, and they only see what they're doing.
The intellectual curiosity dies down a little bit.
It dies down. The day-to-day of it takes over, and that curiosity dies down. And I'm telling you, it is one of the most powerful things, I think, when leaders understand that they have to grow, at the same level or faster than the people that they're, quote unquote, leading.
Right.
So in order to grow, you've got to be out there. You've got to be curious.
Now, my staff, Rick, hates it when I become intellectually curious, right? And I start thinking big ideas and what are we going to do around this? How does your staff feel about that when you start thinking about how to do different things? Are they just sort of used to that?
Oh, they think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
You know how. I think that's probably the case with most organizations, most leaders, particularly visionary leaders and stuff. People. It's hard for them to kind of, because they're always trying to keep up.
Right.
They're trying to keep up.
Right.
And we're in our heads and we're seeing things and having experiences that other people don't. But the one thing that I've learned about that is really, and I'm not great at it. I'm not saying that I'm the best at this, because I struggle with it too. But being patient, being patient with those who are who really want to be there. They don't want to sit there and say, oh, what is this crazy idea?
Right.
They want to understand it, and just being able to be patient and help them identify ways.
And they have the
to
same passion. It's just a little bit different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I remember one time early on when I was at Children at Risk, and we'd hired a couple of new people, and I had a staff member who was very good, and she said, well, I'll just be glad when things sort of settle down. And I said, things are not going to settle down. We're not settling down.
Not a good idea.
We're going.
Yeah.
Tell me how, because you've been a fixture in Houston, and Project Row Houses, a lot of people know about it, some don't, right? But then receiving this accolade from MacArthur, this fellowship, how has it changed you, and how's it changed the organization?
Yeah. Okay. Well, receiving any kind of national recognition like that, it obviously gives you a whole different range of exposure, to people, places, and opportunities.
Right.
And I think one of the challenges for me was to make the commitment to utilizing the resources and the newly attained access to grow the capacity of Project Row Houses. That became, because at one point I was kind of like, well, maybe I should go do something else. But I realized that that's one of the biggest challenges of neighborhood-based organizations, is generally when people get, when opportunities come their way, and or they get added access to things that they didn't have before, they leave, and I didn't want to be a part of that. So it was an opportunity for me to kind of refocus myself. But I think the benefits of the organization has been access to all of these new people. I was just I think I might have mentioned this to you in a conversation that we've had before about, sitting in New York with the 14 largest foundations in the country, and being able to lobby them about coming to Houston, and not just for Project Row Houses, but, none of these foundations have any major initiatives. in our city.
And it's like for the first time they want to listen to you. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's not everything. You can't just call up, 14, presidents of major foundations and say, "Hey, I want you guys to sit here and listen to me." Yeah. It doesn't happen very often. So.
Wow, what a great thing! And for the organization, does it bring for the staff of the organization? Does it bring that sort of similar prestige with it?
Yeah. I mean, because what happens is, I think, the more exposure that we have, the more people are calling, and I can't do everything. So now there are staff members that are doing it, which is really great because it also helps nurture the leadership abilities that they have.
Yeah.
They need that. It's challenging for most people, I know when I first started speaking nationally, and so it's always nerve-wracking, to like go in front of some audience that you don't know who they are, but it grows. You grow in the process, and I think that I'm really excited to have a lot of the staff at Project Row Houses now having to, up their game, and play on that level. Yeah,
that's a very nice thing. I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to go back to creativity and leadership. Do you think that you as a creative person and as a leader, that you're a different leader because you have this creative background, or are you still just a strong leader and you just happen to be creative as well? And it's hard for you to just say, "Yeah, I'm a strong leader," but I mean, I'm acknowledging you're a strong leader. Yeah. So,
well, I think I think to me, I think leadership it comes in a lot of different forms, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are the people that are leaders from an academic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaders who are trained in certain styles of leadership and so on. And then there are leaders, like I consider myself, that are just the intuitive, passionate leader. So I don't really have, I don't have necessarily a playbook, in terms of.
Right.
I mean, that's why I stick with those, those core things about, passion and commitment, as being, key. But there are other aspects of leadership that other people apply that, that is effective for the work that they do. I mean, I think, corporate, leadership, in a corporate business, standpoint, I think the passion is a very different kind of passion than the passion that I have.
Mm-hmm. If we were to bring together some of the people that work with you, and we said, "Hey, tell us about Rick's leadership style," what would they say is your style of leadership? They'd laugh a little bit.
Yeah, they definitely laugh a bit. They would talk about it being, intuitive.
Yeah.
I think they would probably say that I'm very persistent. They would say that I'm a dreamer. Mm-hmm. I mean, there, things like that they'll, those are things that, that also makes it, it's a challenging kind of leader to work with, right? Because those are all things that are.
No, that's right.
They move. I mean, the intuition is coming from places where people don't understand. And the. So anyway, it's just a harder.
Now you're a very nice guy, but I know that you're driven, and I'm wondering, for the people that work with you, do they see an intensity sometimes as well? Is that something that they'll see from you, or do you always sort of come across as pretty nice guy? And
I think I come across as generally a pretty nice guy because I also understand that I'm pretty intense. About the work.
Yep.
And that's a part of my. I'm aware that can be a little, intimidating for people to work with you, and so I always I consciously try to dial that down, and I try to keep the good guy, thing on the up, as much as possible to keep from, kind of, everybody else having to feel that, because I feel it and it's coming from, a particular place, but but they don't necessarily know that, and so I try to, keep them, give them the
I have to work
the
very
happy
hard
side.
at that too. I mean, I'm a nice guy too, but I get so intense sometimes. I have to work at it. So, all right, let me go to the Twitterverse and see what people are tweeting in terms of questions. So, Julie Voss has an interesting question. She wants to know about your workforce and people at Project Row Houses. Is it a multi-generational workforce? And if it is, how do you foster collaboration amongst generations? Great question.
That's a very, very, very good question. In fact, so the way that our staff, most people are kind of, there's a couple of younger 20-something-year-olds, but most people at 30-ish, 30-ish to 40. Yep. And so there's not a lot of range there. But then when you bring in the elements of our board, and then there are teachers that work in our education programs and so on and so forth. A lot of them are younger folks. It's I always encourage people, and I try, and hopefully that just it kind of goes from my the way that I go about doing the work, where I love to listen and learn from everybody, and so I try to instill that in people, and so even the students, the students that are there have something that they can teach, and so to me it's very, very important that everybody understands that, and I think our staff is pretty good at that. It's a pretty good dynamic of and also we have actually informally to our staff, we have advisors in the founders. There were other founders of Project Row Houses who they don't work in the organization, they don't have any official position, but they have great wisdom. And so having them in the process throughout, and so it's kind of nice having that kind of the older generation kind of bringing the wisdom into the workplace.
One question is your elevator speech. When you're on an elevator and someone says, "What's Project Row Houses?" That's a lot to talk about, isn't it? I mean, what do you say in a sort of a quick conversation?
I know we just at our staff retreat just recently, we had a long conversation about this because I'm an anti-elevator speech person.
Oh, good. You like to have a long, engaging conversation.
I would say, some people say, well, you got to have it to be able to get people's attention, blah, blah, blah. And I understand that. And then the other side, I'm like, but if they're only going to give me an elevator time, then they don't really want to know, because it's there's a lot.
Really just going to another floor. They don't really want to know about it.
And but when I do have that opportunity, though, I do understand there are times you meet people and you just gotta say what it is you do. And so my quote unquote elevator speech is that that Project Row Houses is a community-based arts organization that provides historic preservation, arts and cultural activities, education and social service programs. And that's that's kind of the But what I find interesting about that, though, is it gets really it doesn't work so well as an elevator speech when you say an arts program, because that just throws. If I just said we're a nonprofit that provides arts education, after school programs, and transitional housing or social service programs, people go, they'll like.
You get it.
Yeah.
But when you start with an arts.
When I say an arts, and they go like, but wait a minute, how does an arts, project do this? And so it throws it off a little bit. But I think that's kind of one of the.
Well, in a sense, it's one of the unique things about your program. It'd be like the Museum of Fine Arts building homes for single moms.
Yeah, right.
Well, what do you mean?
Yeah, right.
But that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, that's exactly it. And it makes it complicated, and that's the beauty of it to me. But for the elevator, it's a little complicated.
Yeah.
So the essence of who we are is. There's a complication to it.
And is there anyone like you anywhere in the country? Are there groups like you that are sort of community-based arts programs that are doing all these things in the community?
Yeah, there are some. In fact, Oh, I have to promote this coming up pretty soon. Actually, I was just in LA a week or so ago doing a photo shoot with two colleagues of mine. Mark Bradford, who's in Los Angeles. He's in the Crenshaw area, where he's doing great work. Basically, his programming is arts, and but there's a focus of foster care. So he's providing training and programs, technology programs for foster care youth.
Yeah.
And
how interesting.
Yeah, it's really good. And then there's another colleague in Chicago, Theaster Gates, who is who's basically he's doing housing and renovating buildings and carrying on and so on and so forth. So it's like so there are others around, but these two I bring up in particular because I was out in LA last week for a photo shoot for the New York Times. That's going to hopefully, I think that's going to come out in it's the New York Times magazine that comes out in November. I think it's coming. So yeah.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And it's the three of you?
Yeah, it's the three of us. Yeah, they're trying to draw a connection between.
Are there the other two geniuses as well? I think.
Mark Bradford is a MacArthur Fellow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And Theaster not yet, but I'm sure he's
fellow.
Yeah.
He will be. He will be one.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
How do you, John Holland wants to know, how do you recognize good leadership within your organization? How do you recognize others as being good leaders?
Yeah, I guess man, these are great questions. They're very tough questions. I haven't really thought about that very much. Okay, I guess I want to know if there's a certain kind of focus. I mean, if there's focus and commitment to what we're doing is the kind of the first thing, and then I want to be able to know that there is a passion that's evolving, right? Because the thing is that when you bring people into positions, they don't necessarily come with that passion because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they have to kind of work around it, and so I kind of look for the the passion kind of coming in, and people are passionate in different ways, as I've said, and then I start to watch to see their effectiveness and to see particularly the ones that are moving into leadership positions. It's about how do they deal with the people down the ladder as opposed to up the ladder. And so a lot of times, there are people that are great at dealing with people up the ladder, and they can, they work that really well, and they build great networks and relationships with people up. But then the people that are down below, they're not very good at that. And that, to me, that's very problematic, so that's a very problematic thing to me because, I think the core values of the work that we do is about people at the at the grassroots level, as opposed to at the top. And I always think that when somebody can handle the grassroots part of it, they can potentially grow into the up the ladder part easier than someone doing the reverse.
How do you probably different than yourself, but I grew up in Puerto Rico, very poor. We loved free school lunch. We loved this is the highlight of my day was free school lunch. And I sometimes wonder in hiring other people, does it matter if they had humble backgrounds or not? And I do find differences, but I find good leaders on both sides.
Yeah.
But I do see differences. Sometimes people who've worked their way through college, you get a certain something. But sometimes, the kids who come out of Rice or Harvard, they bring this sort of brash intelligence sometimes. Have you found sort of some differences and your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. That's always a big one because I think, but I think I completely agree with you that there's no, across the board answer.
Yeah.
But I will say this though, for the kind of work that we do, it seems that there's a kind of authenticity to the connection that
people get it, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, there's but then on the other hand, there are some people that just have the gift to do it, right? So just on a volunteer capacity, it was really interesting that we had a young woman that showed up. She's white, non-African American, in an African American community. So first of all, you'd think, well, I wonder how she would fit in. So we have to think of what we could get her to do that would help her fit in. And then she had a bit of an accent. I think I think her last place was Australia. I think she was saying.
Okay.
So there was like a little bit of that. We're thinking like, my first thought was like, I don't know if she, if this would kind of work. And then I just realized that she's, her generosity of spirit, like immediately kind of disarm people around her and allow people to feel comfortable with her, which I think is a very, that's a big part of, leadership, and is having people feel comfortable with you. And I also think that she was, I just have to keep saying this. There's a certain kind of generosity of spirit.
Yeah.
Even when she had knowledge to offer, in correcting someone, there was a particular way that she'd do it that was not offensive to people around, and all of a sudden, and now she is like people are fighting over, who's, can we have her work over here? Can we have her work? So it's.
Oh, very nice.
Yep.
That's very good. All right, let's go. Elsa Flores wants to know about fundraising. And how do you do fundraising? And are you a good fundraiser?
I think, there are different fundraising attributes. I generally tell people that my best attribute is that I'm a good bait. I can go into the waters and and kind of allow people resources to kind of connect with me, and but I have to have somebody with the line on me that can actually reel them in, because so my role is basically to to excite people about what we do, and then there are other people that can, their role is to be able to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, make sure that everything is in order, that those, that people who are on the hook, are really, are. Do
you have good fundraising staff around you?
We have pretty good, but but we're always trying to improve it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's. And good fundraising staff, it seems like everyone wants sort of the superstars of fundraising.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Ashley Lawson wants to know, when it's leading, it's often hard to release control. And how do you deal with releasing control to others? And you've had to do that a number of times, right?
Yeah. I always tell people that that for me, the thing that's been able to allow me to do that is that I try not to know everything.
Yeah.
I like to know a little bit about everything, but I try not to become, an expert that people think that I should do everything. So it's like, I know a little bit about budgeting, but I'm not gonna. I could probably know a whole lot more about budgeting too if I really, wanted to spend the time doing it. But why would I do that? I would be taking the opportunity for someone else, who could actually.
Plus, it's more fun for you to have a CFO or a financial person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've, unlike a lot of people who are the founders of organizations, many of them become, the executive directors and so on and so forth. But I always tried to not become that, right? Because I wanted to be able to have, some leadership and to nurture leadership in place that, for whatever reason, if something happened to me, that the organization and the work that's going on has some foundation through which it could continue. Yeah.
Was there a time when you stepped away from Project Row Houses when they were trying to run on their own, or have you always been?
I've always been around, and been involved at different levels, different times.
Yeah. So you've always been there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's find a new question here. Ashley, let's see. 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 Ashley, let's So Stephanie Jones wants to know, what in particular helped you embrace new additions to your vision? Where was it that you started moving beyond? You know, what helped you embrace these new ideas?
Yeah. Well, there are many, many, many steps that have kind of, come along the way. The first big major one was when I went from making paintings to doing the kind of work I do now, which I call social sculpture. And the big change there, the catalyst there was that, oh gosh, must have been in 1990, 91. I just created this large installation of paintings about, police brutality, poverty, domestic violence, and all these environmental issues and stuff. And I had put this big exhibit up, and then I took it all down to my studio. Then I had a group of high school students visiting, and there was one student that walked through, and that's why I said I learned, you always listen.
Yeah.
You try to listen to everybody, no matter how old, you learn stuff. But this group of high school students were there, and this one student came through and he said, well, Mr. Lowe, while your paintings and sculptures show what was happening in our neighborhoods, like, we don't need that. We already know what's happening in our neighborhoods. It's like, we need solutions. And he said, if you're creative, why can't you create a solution? And so that,
Wow.
I was a teenager, challenging me. And so I heard that and I kind of thought about it, how can I actually, shift my work in a way that satisfied me as an artist, but also helped the community in a real practical way. So that was one of those major moments of kind of, something kind of helping me see how to do things differently, or having me consider it. And then throughout Project Row Houses, there's been a number, of things, right? Usually I try to make sure that things are connected to things that are going on and not things that are unrelated, right? Mm-hmm. So as Project Row Houses started out with these little 22 shotgun houses,
yep.
For some people it was kind of they thought it was a little crazy that all of a sudden we were talking about doing new constructed rental houses, and they said, but you're an arts group, and you have this little young mothers program, and that's okay, but now you're going to get into housing and real estate. What's that all about? Mm-hmm. But there was a connection there. As we were developing our transitional housing program for young mothers and listening to the program, letting the program speak to us so that we could learn from it. And one of the things that we learned was that we were providing a great environment and network for the women that we were serving, but then when they graduated, they had to move out to areas that would break that bond. And so it made sense to say, well, we need more housing for them, decent housing in the neighborhood that they could actually move into and keep that connection in their networks. And that's what led us into housing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
if everything went the way that you wanted it to go, what would Project Row Houses look like in 25 years?
I think Project Row Houses started as an organization that was investing in the physical environment of the neighborhood. Right? I think that the work that needs to happen in our neighborhood going forward it's vast. I mean, and I don't see Project Row Houses being able to take all of that on. Mm-hmm. So the direction of my leadership right now is to help nurture our growth as an institution that connects resources for the growth and development of our neighborhood, so that we don't have the pressure and we can stay nimble and we can kind of engage in ways without having a heavy infrastructure, but we can actually play a pivotal role in changing the neighborhood by utilizing our access, to people both in the city, outside of the city, to bring resources in and have those resources applied within the neighborhood that will ultimately get us to where we want to see our neighborhood in the future. So in 10, 15 years down the line, I think there will be some elements of that you'll visually and be able to experience through what Project Row Houses is, but the main part of it to me is the networks that we've woven together that the people who know will know that we've had our hands in the kind of growth and design of the entire neighborhood on some level.
This is sort of the power of collaboration in a sense.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. These are our final sort of fun questions. One of the questions that we often ask leaders is work-life balance. Do you have a work-life balance?
There is no balance. There is no balance.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think it's I can't imagine. I just don't call what I'm doing work.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my mentors said this, and I have to agree with him on it. That to be quite honest, I would pay someone to let me do the work that I'm doing. I mean, because it's it's what I enjoy. It's kind of like, it's kind of like thinking about, when I think about basketball, it's you think about how, like, there are guys who play professionally and they get, huge contracts and they get paid a lot of money for it, right? But there are people out here that get no money for it, that play as much as anybody else because it's something they love to do, and I feel very fortunate that I'm actually doing something that I love so much that I don't necessarily see, it didn't dredge up that kind of feeling of like, oh, work, it's like, I need a vacation. It's like, you know what, every moment is kind of a vacation.
So when you're on the way back from London coming back to Houston, are you thinking work? I mean, are you thinking Project Row Houses and you're thinking all the things associated with that? Is that part of?
Yeah, that's part of it. But another interesting thing about my work as well is that Project Row Houses is it's my mainstay, whatever. But I'm also working on projects in many different places, and so so those things actually help my mind kind of expand. So there are things that are happening in Dallas or Philadelphia, that give me energy. That when I can come back and I could bring it into Project Row Houses, or if I'm something in Korea, something like that. Think that kind of stuff. It adds a different level of excitement that takes it out of that kind of work rim.
It's interesting how every place you visit, every place people that you visit, people might think it's not related, but everything can be related, right?
Gosh,
it really comes back.
Absolutely, and that's why that was my thing about early on, saying it's important for leaders to understand that that they have to grow and they have to constantly learn. You have to figure it out, whether it's through travel or whatever, or just being in your own city. If your work doesn't afford you that opportunity, but you know what? To travel from my organization to your organization is a great, it's a great thing, right? Or to go, just visiting someone else's organization just to visit them, it begins to be, that's learning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love doing that stuff. Yeah. Your favorite restaurant in Houston, Rick?
Oh, my favorite restaurant. I tell you where, I don't know if it's my favorite restaurant, but I tell you, I had one of the best meals I've had ever, and it might have been because of the people that I was with, and they didn't even ask for the menu and the price on the menu.
They just brought in the food.
Yeah, it was Uchi's.
Oh, Uchi. Oh, that's fantastic.
I mean, we sat there and we said, we don't want to order from the menu, and you just tell us what.
The waiters are good there about doing that.
Oh, they're really great,
Yeah.
And every single. It was amazing, yeah.
I've gone there at happy hour where we just say everything on the happy hour menu, just bring it, because we know it's going to be less expensive, but they also just bring us everything.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And is there a place in Houston that's sort of like as a secret venue, a secret place that not a lot of people know about that you think they need to know about this?
Well, in terms of art, there is, one of the great places in Houston that's kind of under the radar is the Station Museum. Which is just across the street from the Houston Community College.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't get there very often, but I love every time I've been there. It's been extraordinary.
It's a pretty amazing place, and that's basically because they, the space and the scale of the space is kind of like a nonprofit, art space, but it's under the leadership of one of the all-time great, curators, museum directors, Jim Harris, that the world has known, and so it's pretty special.
Yeah, I went to a Kinky Friedman fundraiser there. That was a bit. That was the scene. And when they do the Rick Lowe movie in Hollywood, who's going to play you, Rick?
Oh,
yeah, who would be a good person to play you?
Oh, wow. I don't know. Let me see.
You just go with Denzel if you want.
No, Denzel. I think Denzel's kind of obvious. I'm trying to think of because somebody who's like, Denzel is kind of an obvious guy because I think we have a lot of the same kind of, temperament and but I would love to say somebody like. Don Cheadle. I mean, we don't have the same look, but I think he would bring something interesting because
he's a more interesting actor. He's not as sexy maybe as Denzel, but he's a more interesting actor.
Yeah, and the thing is about and a lot of people publicly don't necessarily see it so much, but people who work with me and people that are close, they know that I'm really just kind of silly. I can be really silly. And I don't think Denzel does the silly stuff that well, and I think Don Cheadle could do he could be silly. Wow. He could silly it up.
Rick, thank you so much for coming into the studio tonight and talking with us, and thank you for all the great work that you do, and thank you for being my buddy.
Thank you for having me here.
All right. Nice to see you. Yep. Very good. Yep. Hey, we'll see you guys next time here at the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Keep up the good work.